Welcome to Acute Conversations, the official podcast of APTA Acute Care, where we share engaging conversations about acute care physical therapy so you can connect to your profession. I'm Nicole.
And I'm Leo. In today's episode, our guests are James Crick and Enjeen Wolford. We discuss CSM 2026 in Anaheim, California, and the acute care content that will be featured.
We also discuss tips on attending CSM and the network opportunities. Enjoy the show.
All right, welcome to another episode of Acute Conversations. Today, we've got some great guests. We've got James Crick and Enjeen Wolford. Thank you so much for being here. I have history with both of them and also with CSM. And so the purpose of today's podcast is just to talk up CSM, which is going to be CSM 2026, Anaheim, California. Enjeen, James, thank you. And also I've got my co-host Nicole with me today.
Glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Yes, thank you. I'm glad you put in the Eastern time and the Central time too. I just have to say, Leo.
When Nicole and I were putting this podcast together, okay, let me make sure that we have the right time, because just in this episode, we've got 3 different time zones, right? Central, Eastern, and Pacific. But let me just start off. Enjeen and James, what are your roles with CSM, particularly with the acute care content that is going to be featured? What are your roles in terms of the planning, and what do we have to look forward to for CSM 2026?
Okay, so we are co-chairs the programming for CSM. I've been doing it now for a lot of years. I can't even count the many years. 7, 8, 9. I can't even remember. Oh my gosh, his name just Jonathan. Jonathan is the one who brought me on board, and then I took the chair position. And then James, I nabbed him real when we first met. He was a reviewer, and I was like, because I can't do this alone. And James, it's really a wonderful relationship because James takes care of all that technical stuff, and I'm just talk.
We make a great team for sure. This is my I think 4th year in the role, and Jean leads the show, which is critical because I feel like I get too scattered, and then Jean keeps us on track and says, James, I need you to take care of these things. And so I can be pretty task oriented. But Jean was saying, when potential presenters apply to or submit to present, then it comes to our group to begin to process that, to go through a rigorous peer review, and then ultimately to decide on the annual programming for CSM.
Very cool. What highlights do we have to look forward to for this CSM that's coming up?
We have a lot of great highlights. We all received an email from the Acute Academy a few weeks ago, and there's a lot of great focus groups and research connections that we have going. And we have the Acute Care Residency and Fellowship Social, Coffee with Leadership, and the wonderful lecture award from Dr. Barbara, that precedes our wonderful social and meeting on Friday night. So that is the social side. We have a lot of great programming also for, we have 27 sessions along with the posters, which unfortunately we're not that aware of it because another committee takes care of that. Mm-hmm. The 27 sessions are great.
Yeah, just to double click on that, we have education session content areas that are pretty broad. So spanning things from ICU rehab, emergency department, discharge planning, management and operations, research and publishing, education and mentoring. And then we have some kind of niche domain specific content. So for our neuro folks out there, we've got some specialized content relating to demyelinating neuropathies and POTS and sarcoidosis, and a really diverse array where there really is something for everybody. It's always a fun thing to try and think about. This is our first time back on the West Coast in a couple years now. And so what this allows us to have, we always have to think through is there are like some evergreen concepts that we have some outstanding presenters that it's not the same content every year, but there are some similar topic areas that tend to be really well attended. But then we also want to obviously give opportunities for folks who maybe either haven't presented before or where there are topical areas that we haven't touched either recently or at all. Some of those like emerging innovations, whether that's driven by research or practical application in things like operations. We want to make sure that we're spotlighting those things as much as we can.
Very cool.
Yeah.
We have a meeting. I'm sorry, Nicole.
No, go ahead.
We have a meeting with the section program chairs of all the different academies in May after CSM. And in that meeting, there's a big push about what the content should be, what we're gearing towards, but more specifically, and I really want to push this, especially since you told us about our audience, Leo, our big goal is to cultivate and bring up the new speakers and the people that have never spoken in a conference before. That's our big push. And all the committees are trying to do that. All the sections are trying to do that because we have some wonderful, talented therapists that have been doing the CSM for years and years, and people dive and make sure they attend those sessions. However, there's so many interesting new people that are out there that we don't know of yet. So we would love to start showcasing them as well.
I love that. That really great succession planning for years to come for this conference. So what you're saying is that the planning for the conference starts almost immediately after the conference.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
I wanted to back up a little bit because James, you said there were 27 accepted presentations, right? About, you don't have to give us an exact number, but about how many were submitted. So what's your acceptance rate on that front?
Yeah, it's a great question. And we see some regional variation. So I do think that at least to some degree, we have presenters who are not traveling across the country. And so we were slightly lower this year. I think we were somewhere around 60 submissions this year, an acceptance rate, I think, of just less than half. Whereas other years we've been up in the 70s. And that is in contrast with some of the other academies. As you can imagine, acute care is somewhat niche as compared to something like orthopedic or sports or something like that they, just because of the attendance that they will have from the general conference standpoint, they are afforded both more education session slots because they have substantially more proposals as well.
It's funny, James, you had mentioned about with the acute care section and we're in kind of like this niche grouping. What I think is so fun and unique about our section is that I feel we're so close knit. Right? We go to one section and there's some familiar faces. You go to another section and there's familiar faces. And I also feel that in terms of audience participation, it's such a great experience, like especially at the end of the education sessions, they usually have the open mics for people to come up and ask questions. And I feel that participation is, and I don't want to say this exclusive to acute care, but I do feel there's something cool about seeing familiar faces. Could you maybe just talk about for those people that are maybe on the fence about going to this current CSM, or just maybe new grads or students that have not taken the jump to go ahead and be part of CSM, what advice would you give to them to be able to especially attend the acute care section presentations?
Yeah, it's such a great question, Leo. And I think we're at an interesting time, like writ large, as technology continues to advance and evolve, that you have to ask yourself a little bit about what is the relative value proposition of flying across the country, maybe to go and spend several days in a hotel room. What is the benefit, especially when I have to give kudos to the APTA. They've made some significant investments to afford a lot more opportunity to engage with this content through the on-demand platform. So we have a giant footprint in the on-demand space now for those who aren't able to travel. But I think it does bring us back to the humanity of it, right? That whether you're coming, or maybe it's the first time or the second time, or you're on the fence about coming, I think that this is the place to network and to connect. That is the most important and valuable thing that I would give anybody who's new or newer to attending CSM is think ahead a little bit about what it is that you are wanting to do in terms of like, why am I showing up in person? What is there in terms of the value to my career? What would a successful conference look like? Maybe you're looking for a residency to join, right? So you're trying to get connected with some of the residency directors to be able to have an idea of what's going to be available and what the benefits are of attending a certain residency. Or maybe you're considering another degree, right? Maybe you're looking for a new job, whether that's as a clinician or a leader or an academic. And maybe you're like me when one of my first CSMs, this was several years ago before Enjeen and I started working together, but I was looking for ways to get involved in the academy. I said, I'm invested in my acute care practice. How are ways where I can contribute? And I'll tell you, there's no shortage of ways to get involved, particularly once you're in the room. And all of you guys know this, that it's such a welcoming environment as well. And so when you start to make it known of what you're interested in or who you're wanting to be able to get in front of, there's never been a time when I haven't been able to get a conversation with somebody who I wanted to be able to get in front of. And that's such an incredible benefit, right? Because maybe you're reading papers by somebody, or you're watching content by somebody, or you've heard somebody speak. Maybe it's even on this podcast, and you're thinking, wow, wouldn't it be cool if I could sit down for a cup of coffee with, whoever that might be? And quite honestly, they're probably at CSM, and this is the time to do it. This is the place for all of you who are looking to engage and connect with other humans with shared interests to advance your career, or even just to get to know people.
I would tack on to that to say the presentations are a great way to get to hear some of your favorite speakers or new speakers. Also, I can tell you firsthand how influential meeting people at their posters has been. I've kept in contact with people that we've had some really great, fruitful conversations that have shaped who I am as a clinician now from those poster presentations. I think that's always my favorite time to stand and ask and meet and connect and share contact information. So you're saying that it's more, going in person is more valuable than just getting to go to the vendor fair.
Despite all of the swag, there is more benefit than just going to the exhibition.
Yes. Yes.
I will say, do you remember the year? Did they always give out those Theracanes? Do you remember those Theracanes that one year? I forget what year.
There was a year they gave out Theracanes?
Yeah, they gave out these Theracanes. And so I had, of course, you just see everybody in the airport with these Theracanes.
Exactly.
So I only had a carry-on. So I just remember I had I looked like a Ninja Turtle, right? I had the Theracane sticking out of my back. And then, of course, the person I sit next to, this is on the way home from CSM. They're like, oh, you must have been at CSM. And so she ended up being a therapist. And that person, Shannon Postard, I think she ended up presenting over at Bridge the Gap. I think she was one of because Nicole helps out, and that's how I met Nicole, Bridge the Gap. And so she was actually one of our presenters, and it's been cool because we've been able to kind of maintain that relationship. And she was on the podcast from Bridge the Gap. So the swag does lend to a lot of good conversations, but definitely the education sessions and also the swag. And of course, I still have water bottles from different universities and whatnot. I wanted to ask all of you, do you have any fond memories of past CSMs, specific with our fun acute care section?
We've had some really fun times. I always love being out in the hallway where the Oxford debates are, where that session is, because it is, first of all, I have to go to the rooms next door to say I'm sorry because they're so loud. And then just to see, because they can't hear the sessions next door, like I can't hear any. Okay, we'll turn down the mic a little bit on this room. But I always enjoyed doing that. I've always enjoyed seeing what costumes you guys have going on at that time. And of course, the social is just a wonderful time to all together and just relax, have a couple of drinks, and then just see everybody and just catch up. It's a very nice time to do that. Alongside with every other time when you're walking up and down the hallways. James and I do a lot of steps when we're at CSM. And Tracy and I is running that every time she sees me, she's, okay, how many steps did you take? So we're always passing everybody in the hallways.
Yes, indeed. Yeah, I want to double click on that for sure. I think that I have some of the fondest memories from being able to sit in the lecture award. So we have an annual lecture award for the Academy. That's a pretty prestigious award. And so there's always a lecture for the award from 6 to 7 o'clock on Friday night. And so it's always in that time slot, but then that bleeds straight over into a short membership meeting and then a social, Jean was saying. And so that is the place where so many people will coalesce and congregate. And you get the chance to unpack and talk a little bit about the lecture award, to spend time with whoever gave the lecture. But then if there are people from acute care, most of them are all gathered there during that time. And so I have a bunch of fond memories of just getting to know people that I, once again, had read their papers or heard them speak, and then get to sit down at the table and spend a little bit of time just getting to know people. So I think that's what I value the most about CSM, is being able to spend time in those type of venues.
And I think that's also my opportunity to come out, or one of the podcast co-producers to come out and get possible guests, right? Or just kind of, hey, let me just talk to you for 2 minutes. How's CSM going? So we've got some content for the podcast. And it is an honor because I have Enjeen on this episode today.
Yes.
So I don't know how many CSMs ago, it was just before the podcast was even official. We're like, there's this thing called podcast that we should probably jump on, especially for APTA acute care. can we make this happen? I think part of that initial group, I think Sharon Gorman was part of it, and then Jean was part of that conversation too, and she went to some of our preliminary initial meetings. And Jean, thank you so much for helping set up some of that framework, the foundation, which is now our podcast. So thanks for that.
My pleasure. I'm so happy to hear it going on, and it's well received. I'll jump on every now and then just to hear what's going on. And it's been amazing, the content, the guests that you've been interviewing and speaking with, and who you were able to get on and speak, and all the other crazy things. The podcast thing, though, after the lecture award, after the social, might not be the best time.
This is the best time.
No,
Okay.
We can get all the candid responses.
Yes,
That's right.
all the candid responses. Yes,
Yeah.
that is true.
So for those students out there or new grads, I think it's usually like the NomCom committee, which this year, I think Leslie Ayers is stepping off and Bridget Griffin is going to be the new NomCom chairperson. They usually have drink tickets. So seek out Bridget for drink tickets. And then after you have a couple drinks, come for the interview section where I'll be doing the podcast. And then I can go ahead and get your full uninhibited response of how everything is going. And I'll share some of my favorite memories too. Is Jean's quote, I remember, was Prosecco, baby. That's what it was. That was in Jean's quote. Jean, I'm going to quote you today about my favorite CSM quote. And I was just asking people, what's your favorite drink? What do you like to drink? And she's like, Prosecco, baby. That was in Jean's quote.
Yeah.
This year, you'll have to, when you're doing your recording, you'll have to go over and ask her how many steps instead.
There we go.
How many steps.
Thank you. That's a much better question.
It sounds like part of the planning committee responsibility obviously don't end at the conference. They keep going in terms of ideas and planting the seeds for future things like the podcast and more innovations into our section here. How do you see CSM evolving in the next 5 to 10 years as our profession starts to evolve? What other innovations can we look forward to?
So a couple of years ago, I don't even know, James, was it like 3-4 years ago where we were really pushing certain content? We were thinking, this is what we need to bring on. And I can't even remember what it was per se, but we also wanted to push pre-cons because, believe it or not, pre-cons is a lot of work up front and it requires a lot of effort and planning on the part of the speakers. But it's a great revenue source for the Academy as well. But more importantly, it's so much more interactive. It's a long time, a long day. And we were really pushing like the Shark Tank idea. And then that other pre-con that we did last year for the research base. It was so well received. It just, and we weren't that pushy last year. So we have to be pushy again this year, James.
Yeah, that's right.
I feel like I was involved in that.
Yeah, no, it brings up an interesting point because yes, I remember that distinctly, Enjeen, that there's always a push to say, so there's a lot of work that's done between the APTA and each of the academies. And so within the academy, we get to have quite a bit of influence, not Enjeen and I, but the academy generally, related to things like pre-conference programming, for example. And there are distinct benefits to the academy to have those. But the question is, like, what is worth people coming in early, paying for a course, staying another night in the hotel? And so we were really trying to be thoughtful about what are the value added kind of content components that could be added in that would substantiate all of those things. And so we were fortunate to, we ran a couple of pre-cons. We ran 3 or 4 of them over the last couple of years that have been beneficial, super well received by the attendees. And once again, it does bring in the regional component of, do we continue to run this in this new market, so to speak, because we are going to a different part of the country. But I think that's a big question for me. Of every year, it's a question with amongst the program chairs more generally of whose pre-cons are doing well, what does enrollment look like? Because it's an ROI question. And so if anybody out there that's listening, if you are super, super interested in pre-cons and things like that, let's talk. Because also there's the question mark of how do we continue to do these, or is the ROI present for that as we continue to look at CSM? But I think some of the other interesting things is the APTA is trying to be really thoughtful about, once again, like, what does it mean to have people in person in a location? All of us, thanks to the pandemic or maybe some other influencing factors, we sit behind screens like this so frequently. And so why not do that for our Con Ed as well? And so the APTA is trying to be really forward thinking And so even to call out a couple of examples of from the last couple of years, and we'll be continuing this year, is that like within the exhibition hall, not just can you go get a Theracane, like Leah was mentioning, but they also have a functional fitness gym. And so because the conference centers are so large, there's like actually like rigs and squat racks and like all of the Olympic equipment. You can sign up for slots, they run classes. So trying to like actually get people together, both to exercise and create camaraderie, but also to learn, right? So if you ever thought about, hey, in my clinic, how do I incorporate this barbell training? Then you can do that. Similarly, there's a bark park again this year. So they will have dogs. So for all of our dog lovers out there, make sure you spend some time around the exhibit hall to check out the bark park. But again, thinking through these things, of what are the connection points that make this such a high value conference? I anticipate there to be more and more emphasis on those connections and a relative de-emphasis on, when I say just content, notice this is coming from the content people, but just content of sitting in a room to be able to learn. Some of that I do anticipate is going to transition more to that asynchronous type of participation.
Jim, I kind of want to circle back to what you had said about literally like you walking around and in terms of how important it is when you are in person in terms of that networking component. Like you are literally both of you and Jean are walking around from section to section or from presentation to presentation. And I do remember there have been times where I've seen people just come up to you, or people have asked me, they might have had a question like, you should talk to James or talk to Enjeen if you've got an idea for next year. Guys, I remember Dan Milner, who's over out in Seattle, he had a really good question. I think that was part of the podcast. It was just, I caught the two of you just riffing about evidence. And other times, I think somebody else had an idea. I said, oh, she had a question about some of the details about her research. I'm like, have you met James? Oh, the guy that puts it all together? Yeah, he's right over there on that end of the room. Go talk to him and let me introduce you. So again, the network capabilities you have within CSM, and especially within our small niche of acute care PT, is such a great opportunity. So
that's such a good point. Shout out to Dan, like you were mentioning.
Shout out to Dan.
Hanging out outside, talking about research. But I do want to double click on that. One of the other co-hosts, Danny Young, he has become a mentor to me. That I met Danny at a CSM. I had read his papers for years and thought a lot. And he's, as everybody who's been able to listen to him on the podcast, I'm sure has recognized, just a really thoughtful individual. But a lot of the people who I kind of count in my mentorship circle now, I've established those relationships by connecting at CSM.
Same for me.
Go ahead, Nicole.
I'm going to pivot. Is that okay? I was going to pivot over to the topic that everybody, I feel like, is on the tips of everybody's tongues. How is this mainstream AI impacting the conference planning this year? And from your perspective, now that AI really is like everybody's fingertips.
I find that, I know that it's the big Terminator fear and robots taking over and all that stuff. Initially, when AI first started coming out, I find that AI is a great partner for any industry, really, because it brings you to another level. It makes life so much easier with just emails, for instance. It simplifies things, but it also gives you more data, more information. So I find that if we go forward with this AI proposal, I understand that other industries might not particularly care for it, but I think you can really implement it in your daily practices to help you become a better clinician.
Yeah, and I think as it relates to the conference, that's anybody's guess. I know that we're utilizing it, at least to some degree, for things like transcription and like real-time accessibility. So I think that those are like, especially for these text-based AI platforms, like that's a home run. I think that's just a huge value add. But as it relates to like actually learning, right, I think there's a lot of complex questions. I don't think it's having a substantial impact, at least on CSM execution right now, but who knows coming in the future. I'm reluctant to try and predict that kind of future right now.
There's a conference app, right? I think.
Yes. And anybody who is good.
Give you.
Yeah. So everybody who's going to the conference, go ahead now, if you haven't already, and download the APTA events app. And then you'll click on CSM within there. And within the app-based platform, you can set up your own schedule. And I can't emphasize like how valuable that is enough, because like all of these things that we've talked about so far are just in a small sliver of the acute care world. And there's dozens of other things across the other academies that you're going to be interested in. So we co-partner. So we have fully sponsored 27 educational sessions, but we co-sponsor others across other academies that have acute care implications. And you'll be able to find those within the app. So you might find one that's not just listed within acute care, but we recognize the value in partnering with neurology or cardiovascular and pulmonary or education or whatever the case might be. But it allows you can like favorite all of them, and it populates into a schedule within the app to make sure that then you have your own schedule. That's not just for like educational sessions and things like that, but that's for all of the meetings and events and things as well. And this is important. There will be like same day, like something's going to happen with the AV in one room and they're going to get pushed to another room, and that's going to be updated in the app in real time.
That's beautiful. So the app actually has the whole conference loaded into it, and then you can filter it by your acute care section or acute care sponsored section, kind of adjacent, and then get your favorites and build from there. I'm sure there's got to be some AI working behind that somehow.
That's one of the benefits, I think, of being able to sit in this role with Enjeen, is that we get to give some feedback on that app as well. And I think that this year, at least my kind of preliminary viewings of it, it's a little less clunky than it has been in years past. It's continually gotten better. And so we think that the user interface is a lot better, but to hopefully make sure that like people are getting where they need to go a little easier.
Great, thanks.
So I have some students that are going to be going to CSM for the first time. This is going to be their first CSM. And there's probably listeners to the podcast. There's probably some that are going to be, again, whether they're students or whether they're practicing clinicians, this might be their first CSM. Using the app definitely is a pro tip. Just familiarizing yourself with the map. Okay, what room is, because generally I think the acute care sections has most of their content in kind of pretty close areas. But let's say that you wanted to go to a cardio pump section, or you also want to go to something for outpatient orthopedics. Just knowing the lay of the land is helpful. Do the two of you have any other kind of pro tips for first-time CSM goers?
Wear comfortable shoes.
Yeah, wear comfortable shoes. We're very comfortable. We're in 3 different locations. So CSM has 2 major hotels, the Marriott and the Hilton, and then the conference center, which is in the middle. And inevitably, the furthest apart from acute care is always in the same hotel. And then we'll have a few in the conference room in the conference center, the convention center, the last day. But if you wanted to go to cardio or neuro, it's definitely another hotel, which is all the way across the convention center and then some. So comfortable shoes are a definite must. Take it all in. Take it all in. It's amazing. I'll remember the first time I ever went to CSM. I walked in and I couldn't believe the masses of people that were crossing the street and walking around, and they were all PTs or PTAs, all of them. And they just took over the city. The whole city was taken over. And it's a lot, but it's so energetic. It's so much fun. And there's so many great things you can get there. Yes, the education sessions are wonderful, and the platforms and the posters are all great, but you can get a professional photo done.
Yeah, that's right.
Key. Yeah, so that's a very important thing for somebody who's starting out in a whole graduating or anything. You want a nice professional picture. There's the tchotchkes that you can get from all the vendors there. But even more so than that, even the vendors that are in the convention center, they have some wonderful, great new machines and blah, blah, all that fun stuff. But there are also different booths. You can stop at the education booth. You can stop at the acute care booth. You can stop at all of the sections have a booth. So then you can just try to figure out which section you want to belong to. And so there's a lot. More than you can even handle.
I know every time that I've gone, it's one of those, you feel like you're in this marathon, just taking it all in, like you said, letting it wash all over you. And I'm sure even more so for the two of you as part of the planning committee. What do you do to decompress after and then translate all that into your clinical practice come Monday morning, right? Hit the ground running with all this new information.
Yeah, they actually we've actually have some proposals, some submissions. I think they opened them up already. So I haven't looked at it. I'm not going to look at it, but we definitely decompress by just literally just decompressing it, as most people decompress at the end of the day, but it's a lot. And we just want to take it all in and enjoy what we have going, because it's not over till it's over. But the beauty of it too, though, is the APTA has actually understood the importance of the soul time, the importance of networking. That's why they changed the schedule. They changed the schedule. So it is now the time slots that I've been used to for so long, I have to rethink in my head because it's not the same time slot. So now I'm going to be either early or late for everything I have to do when I get to CSM. But they're now an hour and a half. They've moved it up. So you have, it used to be 3 to 5 was our last session. Now our last session is at 3:30. So you have all that time to actually do a lot more things in the evening and get to see all the focus groups and stuff and all after session meetings.
That's great. Yeah.
You can also go to Disneyland this time around because I heard it's really close to decompress.
It's very close. It's very. I don't know if you call that. I don't know if you call that decompressing going to Disneyland. Have you been? It's crazy.
Hang out with Goofy. Hang out with Goofy for a little bit. Very cool. James and Jean, thank you so much for taking the time and being on the podcast. If people have questions for you all, where can they contact you? Where can they reach you?
Our emails are right. I think our emails are available. Mine is my first name at Gmail, so it's not that hard. They can reach me via email. And James, fortunately, James is the tag he's it for email responses because he does a very good job at it. I'm like, no, yes, maybe responses. So James is a lot more fluent with his responses.
Yeah, I'm happy to connect with anybody who has questions or interest. We are always soliciting interest for people who want to be a part of this, awesome. Whether that's specifically with CSM education programming in the role of a reviewer. So we have a couple dozen reviewers, but we're always looking for more because life happens. And the more eyes that we can get on these proposals, the better. We do everything we can to where Enjeen and I are not making decisions. We are letting our trained reviewers. So if you haven't been trained, again, we can talk about that. We'll take you through the training specifically, but get involved. And so we're happy to do that. My email's my first name dot my last name at osumc.edu. We can put that in the show notes. But happy to connect with anybody. If you're going to be at CSM, particularly if you're interested and are having a hard time getting connected or something like that, grab one of us. You will see Enjeen and I if you open your eyes, because we will be going back and forth and would love to help to get people connected. This is a kind of like Leo was describing, a tight-knit community that you just need that little bit of a step in, and then you can dive in 2-footed. And so we're happy to help to make those introductions for sure.
I will make a pitch. Also, stop by the booth. Stop by the Acute Care booth again. Like, there's always, if you're looking to be involved and you just come, I don't know, like, a little bit shy, and maybe I don't want to speak right after an education session. Stop by the booth. We have plenty of information to hand out and give you. And if your niche is more like specific within acute care, like if it's like working in the ED or questions about CSM programming or clinical education as is related to acute care, come see us and we'll give you some information.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
I think it's time, Nicole. It's time for as we end the show, we have this little thing called rapid responses. And so I'm going to put the timer on for 2 minutes. And as appropriate for acute care, you got to act quick. You got to respond quickly. We're going to ask you a couple questions. And the first thing that pops into your head, spit that out. You guys ready? All right. Nicole, do you have a question ready before I hit the timer?
I do. Yep. I got one ready.
All right. And let's get started.
All right. If you had to go to work at Disneyland as a Disney character for the day, which character would you pick?
I'll go with Aladdin. I actually had one of my first jobs in acute care in Naples, Florida. Shout out Naples Community Hospital. I had a nurse who said, "Did you know that your hair looks like Aladdin?" Me? So, always will be Aladdin from here on out.
Awesome. How about you, Enjeen?
Goofy.
Awesome. Goofy. So, here's my question. So at CSM, what type of shoes are you going to be wearing?
Sneakers. Very fashionable sneakers, my ad, but sneakers.
Yeah.
What about you, James?
This is some comfortable dress shoes.
Comfortable dress shoes. Very cool. Awesome.
All right, I'm going to take it over to acute care focused here. If gait belts could come in designer patterns, what brand do you think would dominate the market?
Oh, designer pattern. That's a good one. That's a really good question. I just wanted to go with a hot pink one. I just love hot pink. Hot pink, vinyl. Who would that be?
I couldn't even name like an up-to-date
I know.
brand. For reference, I tell this to everybody, and Enjeen knows this. My wife dresses me. I couldn't even give a guess.
It's quite the confession for this.
That's a really good question. I'm going to have to think about that as the answer at CSM, Nicole.
All right, sounds good.
I'm going to think really hard about that one.
After a long work day, what type of meal would you want to have? What would be your ideal meal after a long, hard day at work?
Oh, gosh. Anything Korean. I love ethnic food, but I love like Asian food. So yes, spicy.
Love that. Sushi. Go with sushi.
Spicy. Yep.
All right. And that's time, Nicole. Do you want to bring our final question?
Okay, you guys ready for this one? It's you're an acute care therapist when, and you have to finish the sentence.
When you have to go look for your nurse on the floor before you see a patient.
Mm-hmm.
There you go. I was just telling my students about this the other day. When you get the opportunity to help somebody who's been in the ICU for a long time, to give a therapeutic hug to a loved one.
Yeah.
So it's standing at the bedside, first time in a long time, and they get to embrace physically for the first time in a long time. The therapeutic.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
Now that
I was
all our
gonna do- yeah.
melted, that was really clever. Yeah, I like that.
The therapeutic hug.
That is a
We're
good one.
Bill. We're billing for that. That's
It
One minimal
uses
assistant.
a lot of muscles there, okay? There's a lot of muscles being used there.
Absolutely.
It's a
definitely
physical,
therapeutic.
psychosocial, emotional intervention. It
Yeah.
checks all.
That is a
Might be the best
That
one
is
you
a-
can think of.
That's why we love
that
acute
is a
care.
therapy. There you go.
Awesome. And Jean, James, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you very
Look forward to
much.
seeing everybody at
I
CSM.
can't wait to see you in Anaheim. Travel safe. Bye.
We would like to thank Enjeen and James for joining us on the podcast. Acute Conversations is the official podcast of APTA Acute Care. This episode was hosted by Leo Arguelles and Nicole Neveau. Executive produced by Katie Brito and Edward Mathis. Music by Alexei Action from Pixabay, sound effects also from Pixabay. For more information about APTA Acute Care, be sure to check out our show notes for links and resources from the Academy. If you found value from our podcasts, please be sure to subscribe, follow, and share with your friends and colleagues. Join us next time for another engaging acute care conversation. Thank you for listening, and may your shoes and scrubs stay clean today.